12 weeks ago, the Pacific War started with the critical attack on Pearl Harbor and the start of the Japanese invasions across East Asia. Now, the first phase of their expansion is near its end, and the desired prize is within reach of the Japanese Empire. Last week we covered the start of the First Battle of the Java Sea, and the failure of the Abda command to stop the invasion of Java from taking place. Today we're going to see its disastrous conclusion and the final surrender of the Dutch East Indies, as the Japanese finally land on the island of Java. Even without World War to worry about, it's still hard to maintain inner peace with so many sources of anxiety all around. But now you can get back on track with our sponsor, Endel, an app that creates personalized soundscapes designed to combat anxiety, promote focus and creativity, and help you sleep. Their AI-powered program incorporates real-time information, such as your heart rate and the weather, to perfect its soundscapes, staying in tune with your circadian rhythms all day to improve the effect. Neuroscientific studies found it was a fast and consistent way to access the desired state of mind, and scientific research is at the core of their patented technology. Use its 3 modes, relax, focus or sleep, to feel calm and safe, to enable lengthy concentration, or be soothed into a deep sleep. Sounds pretty nice. Support our channel and get a special offer by being one of the first 100 people to use our link in the description. You will get a free week of audio experiences with Endel, so check it out now. As we've previously discussed, the Japanese had planned to execute 2 main amphibious assaults, one in Western Java to be carried out by the 2nd Division of Lieutenant General Maruyama Masao and the Shoji Detachment of Colonel Shoji Toshinari, and one in Eastern Java by the main strength of Lieutenant General Tsuchihashi Yutsu's 48th Division, accompanied by the bulk of the Sakaguchi Detachment. 2 strong fleets escorted the Japanese convoys, which had departed their assembly points by February 19th and were near their objectives by February 27th. Meanwhile, the Dutch defended their main island with 3 fully equipped, albeit poorly trained divisions under the command of General Hein te Putten, totaling some 25,000 soldiers, mostly Indonesian. He divided his forces into 3 areas, with the 1st Division in Batavia and Western Java, the 2nd Division in Central Java, and the 3rd Division in Eastern Java. His plan was to hold on as long as possible to the 3 main bases at Bandung, Cilacap and Surabaya. General Wavell had also reinforced the Dutch troops with around 6,000 British and American soldiers, while the Australians had sent the brigade-strong Black Force of Brigadier Arthur Blackburn by February 16th. Additionally, naval forces at Java were under the command of Admiral Helfrich, who had formed 2 strike forces to intercept and destroy the invasion fleets before they could land on the shores of Java. At the Java Sea, we left Admiral Doorman's Eastern Striking Force retreating eastwards, while Admiral Takagi regrouped his forces to the north. The battle seemed over, but with night falling, Doorman decided to press his attack, rapidly turning to the northeast with his remaining forces in a last attempt to save Eastern Java. Yet again, Japanese float planes flying over the Allied fleet immediately reported to Takagi that Doorman was moving back north, which caught the Japanese admiral off guard. He quickly tried to reassemble his dispersed forces, while 2 damaged destroyers of Admiral Nishimura's 4th Squadron retreated to protect the convoy. Around 1930, after spotting the Allied formation to the southeast, Admiral Tanaka's 2nd Squadron positioned itself in front of Takagi's cruisers to cover them from the incoming enemy fire. The small fire exchange was inconsequential, and thus Doorman changed course to the east, determined to get through to the transports. His intention was to get around the Japanese formation by heading towards the southern coast of Java. At 2100, he turned back to the west with his 4 cruisers and the destroyer Jupiter, while the American destroyers under Commander Thomas Binford headed back to Surabaya to refuel and load more torpedoes. Around 2130, bad luck struck Doorman once more when the Jupiter hit a Dutch mine and foundered hours later, leaving the Dutch admiral with just his 4 cruisers while he continued to the north in search of the Japanese convoy. Around 2200, Takagi also suffered some bad luck, as he lost radio contact with his float planes, leaving him blind for the first time in the battle. Desperately, he turned south, finally spotting the Allied column around 2300. While Takagi's cruisers turned north on a parallel course to Doman's cruisers, Tanaka's squadron prepared to make a deadly torpedo attack. 10 minutes later, the Allied cruisers spotted their enemy and began the fire exchange. Around 2320, the Japanese cruisers finally launched some 12 torpedoes against the Allied formation. Despite Doman's effort to evade the torpedo attack, his determination and his previous failures had brought him at last to his final doom. At 2336, the Java was hit, causing the aft magazine to explode. Within 15 minutes, the cruiser had sunk, with the loss of 509 sailors. 4 minutes later, the De Ruyter was also hit on her aft, suffering a large fire that engulfed the entire stern position of the ship. Powerless, the cruiser sank hours later, suffering 344 losses, among them the Dutch admiral. Taking advantage of the smoke and confusion, the Houston and Perth then changed course and escaped to the southeast, successfully arriving at Tanjung Priok the following day. This concluded the First Battle of the Java Sea, leaving Abtecom with the loss of 2 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and one of its leading commanders. The Japanese Eastern Force was now free to continue their landings unmolested. Meanwhile, the Western striking force had also failed to intercept the Japanese invasion fleet, with the invaders' landings also proceeding as expected. To avoid any more losses, Helfrich was then persuaded to order a withdrawal, with most of the Western force escaping through the Sunda Strait before the arrival of the Japanese. Yet by February 28th, 8 destroyers and 3 cruisers remained trapped on Java's northern shore. At dusk, the cruisers Houston and Perth, and then HNLMS Evertsen departed Tanjung Priok, heading towards the Sunda Strait to escape to safety. Despite the poor Japanese initial deployment, leaving the convoys in a vulnerable position, the 5th Squadron of Rear Admiral Hara Kanzaburo managed to intercept the Allied cruisers and cover the transports with a smokescreen. Hara then attacked in a chaotic way, performing really poorly and only causing light damage to the enemy. What is worse, the Japanese torpedo attack missed the Allied cruisers and hit 4 Japanese transports and a mine layer at Bantam Bay, sinking the 5 vessels, including the one that carried General Imamura, although he managed to survive this experience. In the early hours of March 1st, the Allied cruisers were surrounded and finally hit by torpedoes, then sinking into their final resting place. The destroyer Evertsen had caught up to the 2 cruisers and watched the battle from a distance and attempted to escape along the coast of Sumatra, but ended up spotted by Japanese destroyers Murakumo and Shirakumo and had to run aground. At the same time, Binford's 4 American destroyers, which had decided to escape through the narrow Bali Strait, were detected and came under fire by patrolling Japanese destroyers. The fire exchange was inconclusive though, and the destroyers successfully managed to quickly escape under the cover of smokescreens. The last of the Allied vessels were the damaged cruiser Exeter and the destroyers Pope and Encounter, arriving at the Sunda Strait in the late morning. Their desperate escape was doomed from the start, being rapidly spotted by Japanese aircraft, and so Admiral Takahashi had laid a trap for them. 4 Japanese heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers began to hunt down the Allied force, with the Pope and Encounter laying a smokescreen to protect Exeter from the incoming fire. For the first hour, the invaders failed to score any hits, yet they were continuing to close in on the Allied vessels. Despite their brave resistance, the Japanese cruisers finally scored a crippling blow on the Exeter, causing her to lose power and then sink. The Allied destroyers would also be hunted down in the next hours, with Encounter getting scuttled due to the strong Japanese fire, and with Pope also getting scuttled after an intense aerial bombardment. In the remainder of the day, 4 more Allied destroyers would get destroyed by Japanese aerial and naval attacks to the south, ending the Second Battle of the Java Sea and naval campaign in the Dutch East Indies. On land, however, the Battle of Java was merely starting. by 0400 on March 1st, and despite the friendly fire, the bulk of the 2nd Division had successfully landed around Bantam Bay, with the intention of advancing on Batavia and then Bandung, while the Shoji detachment also landed at the patrol area to capture the valuable Kalijetti airfield. On the other side, the Eastern Force suffered some aerial bombardment, although this couldn't prevent the 48th Division and the Sakaguchi detachment from landing at Kragen, with the objective of taking Rembang and then the Kepu oil field before attacking Sawerabaja and Cilacap. On Bantam Bay, the 2nd Division divided itself into 3 detachments, with the Nasu detachment advancing on Rangkasbitung towards the key Buetazoch town between Batavia and Bandung, the Fukushima detachment immediately capturing Mount Merak and Merak Island before advancing on Pamarian towards Batavia, and the Sato detachment pushing along the coastal road through Bantam and Tangerang towards Batavia. Quickly and decisively, the Nasu detachment managed to overcome Dutch resistance at Merak, Cilegon and Serang before getting to Rangkasbitung by dusk. Meanwhile, from Eretan, the Shoji detachment immediately divided in 2, with 1 battalion charging against the Kalijetti airfield and the other heading towards the Kwarang Bridge over the Kitarum River. Rushing towards the airfield, the Wakamatsu unit rapidly engaged the Dutch defenders, driving them off 4 times and getting to Kalijetti by midday. There, the Japanese seized the airfield after overrunning the defenders and immediately started to refit it for use. Yet despite this initial success, the detachment was attacked at Eretan by 500 Dutch troops in armoured vehicles, which could only be repelled after a hard-fought struggle. The loss of Kalijetti was huge, however, and Tiportan immediately ordered counterattacks to retake it. And from Kragen, the Eastern Force rapidly set up to execute its operations. The Sakaguchi detachment only got to seize Blora by nightfall, but the 48th Division had 1 element capture Rembang, while the rest of the division headed towards Kepu and Bojonegoro. On March 2nd, the vanguard of the Nasu detachment encountered Australian gunners at Cibitung, which obstructed the road to Lewiliang. An intense fight ensued, but the invaders got the upper hand in the end and advanced up to Lawangtaji. Meanwhile, the Fukushima detachment reached the Pamarian Bridge by midnight, and the Seto detachment got to the bridge of Kragilan, successfully establishing a foothold over the Chujung River. But in Subang, the situation was desperate for the isolated Shoji detachment. 250 soldiers and 25 light tanks attacked Shoji's headquarters there and overran the Japanese positions. Yet the invaders held their ground, and after destroying 20 enemy vehicles, the Dutch attack was repelled at last. At the same time, Sakaguchi captured the towns of Purudadi and Nyawen, while the 48th Division easily defeated a Dutch unit and occupied Kepu and its already destroyed oil field. The Japanese got to the Bojonegoro Bridge as well, but found it destroyed due to delaying actions on behalf of the Allies. The following day, however, the invaders had crossed the Solo River and started to engage some defenders on the other side, while the Sakaguchi detachment also seized Bugel and prepared for an attack against Surakata. In the meantime, Shoji and the Wakamatsu unit prepared to brace for another Dutch counterattack with armoured vehicles. The Japanese put up a good fight, but the difference was made by the aircraft flying from the Kalijetti airfield, which managed to destroy over 150 Dutch vehicles and cause over 100 Dutch casualties. At this point, fearing encirclement, Shoji decided to prepare for an attack on Bandung, and to call back the units advancing towards Kwarang to instead traverse through better roads from Kalijetti. Moreover, upon reaching Lewiliang, the vanguard of the Nasu detachment went into battle with the main strength of Black Force, which managed to halt the invaders' advance from their entrenched pillboxes, while both the Fukushima and Seto detachment arrived to the Chidurian River, capturing the bridges at Maja and Parigi. Seeing no roads from Maja, Fukushima would then be ordered to support Nasu's rear, while Seto's vanguard also advanced and captured the town of Balaraja on the next day, getting ever closer to Batavia. In the early hours of March 4th, knowing that they had to break through Lewiliang to save Shoji, the main strength of the Nasu detachment joined the fight against Black Force. Thus, the 16th Regiment was ordered to execute a flanking maneuver to the south, while the rest of the detachment contained the Australians with fire. Under the cover of darkness, the 16th crossed the Chenten River and charged against the positions of an Australian company. Black Force gave a tenacious resistance, inflicting many casualties on the invaders, but in the end, the Australians would get surrounded, and Blackburn would order a withdrawal. While they retreated during the night, the same would be done by the Dutch holding on in Batavia. And in Kaligjati, the success of the Japanese resistance had allowed the Wakamatsu unit to capture Purukata. The Egashira unit had also managed to turn around, getting to Cikampek with haste and arriving at Hwarang after defeating several Dutch units. They then pursued the retreating Dutch soldiers to Kadungade, where the Egashira unit stopped its advance. Having achieved all his initial objectives, and recognizing that the enemy was concentrating his forces, Shoji then decided to fully commit to an attack against Bandung instead of waiting to suffer another massive counterattack, enjoying the support of the mighty 3rd Air Division. Turning back to the east, we find that Sakaguchi finally concentrated his 3 battalions on Purodadi by afternoon, and then launched his attack on Surikata. They would arrive at the town by early morning on March 5th, charging against the meager Dutch defenders and capturing the town by midday. Meanwhile, Sakaguchi's vanguard would also capture Boyolali and, sensing the weakness in the Dutch defences, continued towards Yogyakarta, seizing the town by dusk. Seeing the enemy retreat without restraint, Sakaguchi then decided to closely pursue them until reaching their main objective, Jelajap. Another battalion, however, turned to Mangalang, where it forced the garrison to surrender. But the garrison commander thought that this was the main Japanese force, and so ordered the towns of Semarang and Ambawara to also surrender. After occupying these towns, the battalion would then continue westwards, reaching Purbalingga on March 8th. In the meantime, the 48th Division had finally crossed the Solo River, continuing its advance towards the Brantus River on March 5th. The vanguard of the 48th, mainly consisting of the 47th Regiment and the 4th Tank Regiment, then advanced to Cherubang, where they defeated a Dutch unit and pursued them with haste to Kertosono. There they engaged almost 1,000 enemy troops and managed to capture the town by midday, with another element capturing Kadiri later that day. Meanwhile, important events were happening in the west. Departing Balaraja in the morning, the Sato detachment discovered that the Dutch forces were retreating, and thus advanced with haste through Tangerang and finally arrived at Batavia by dusk. During the night, the Japanese triumphantly entered the colonial capital without opposition, allowing the rest of the division to focus on Bandung. But unbeknownst to the 2nd Division, Shoji had already sent the Wakamatsu unit southwards to Chiata, where it arrived by afternoon. There, however, the invaders were engaged by tenacious defenders in pillboxes across 2 lines. At the end of the day, the pillbox positions had been successfully taken with the help of the 3rd Air Division. But on the following day, the Wakamatsu unit directly attacked the main enemy position at Chiata Pass. There, Major General Jakob Pesman had around 9,000 men, covered with jungle in strong pillboxes and barbed wire entanglements, with the mission of holding off the invaders. But taking advantage of a thick fog, the Japanese charged all at once and took the defenders by surprise, quickly routing them. At this point, if Wakamatsu decided to pursue them, he could have entered Bandung unopposed, but instead decided to wait for the Egashira unit out of sheer friendship to the battalion commander, not wanting to steal the glory he deserved as well. Back with the 2nd Division, when they received news of Shoji's attack on March 6th, the Sato detachment was immediately sent to reinforce them at Kaligjati. At the same time, however, the Nasu and Fukushima detachments were encroaching on Baltazar through Dramaga, yet they found the Australians there retreating. The Japanese then charged into the town and successfully seized Baltazar. And to the east, the 48th Division continued its advance, getting to Mojokerto and sending its vanguard to charge against Purong, while the rest of the division continued towards Suwerabaja. The invaders quickly broke through the Dutch defences, and by afternoon they had captured Purong. On March 7th, preparations continued for the attacks against Suwerabaja and Jelajap, but the Shoji detachment would bring about the rapid conclusion of the campaign. While the Wakamatsu unit consolidated on the ridgeline and mopped up the remaining enemy units, General Pessman found his position untenable and decided to surrender. At Isola Hotel, General Imamura then demanded the total capitulation of the Dutch East Indies, something General Terpoten and the governor initially refused, claiming they didn't have that authority. But on the morning of March 8th, the Dutch commander conceded defeat at last and agreed to the capitulation of all of his troops, something that was broadcasted later on during the night. Elsewhere, the 48th Division entered Suerabaja, meeting no resistance, and Sakaguchi began his assault on Cilacap, getting to Purwokerto before receiving the Dutch surrender. Across Java and the Dutch East Indies, many Allied units that still resisted would also decide to surrender in the next few days, while others continued to execute guerrilla warfare. Only the Allied units at northern Sumatra continued to resist. Yet on this day, the Empire of the Rising Sun had achieved one of its main objectives of the Pacific War, securing a constant flow of resources for its war machine. This also marked the end of the Abda defense in the Dutch East Indies and the collapse of the Malay Barrier. The Indian Ocean and approach to Australia was now open to the IJN. The Japanese expansion would continue in the following week, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.